Every country on Earth trades in dollars. Not because they want to, because if they don't, they get destroyed. The United States dollar is the most powerful weapon ever created. No bullets, no bombs, just a currency that controls the entire global financial system. Sanctions Seizures Control. And for decades, no one could challenge it. But right now, something unprecedented is happening. Nations are building escape routes. Alliances are forming. The dollar's grip on the world is slipping. Today, we're exposing how America weaponized its currency, who's fighting back, and why the petrodollar's reign may be coming to an end. In 1944, the world was still burning. World War II wasn't even over yet when 44 nations gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. He who has the gold makes the rules, and America had most of the world's gold. The deal was simple. Every country would peg their currency to the dollar, and the dollar would be pegged to gold. America became the banker of the entire world overnight. This wasn't charity. This was strategy. With every nation dependent on the dollar for international trade, America gained something no empire had ever possessed before. Financial veto power over the entire planet. Gold dollar power. Think about it. If your country needs dollars to buy oil, to import food, to trade with anyone, then whoever controls the supply of dollars controls you. Controls. And this was just the beginning. Because in 1971, something happened that changed everything. America broke its own promise. And paradoxically, that made the dollar even more dangerous. But that story requires understanding a deal that was made in secret. On August 15, 1971, Richard Nixon went on national television and told the world America would no longer convert dollars to gold. The promise that built the entire global financial system was broken in a single speech. Overnight, the dollar became backed by nothing. No gold, no silver, just trust. And that trust should have collapsed. Every other currency in history, backed by nothing, eventually became worthless. But something saved it. In 1974, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger struck a deal with Saudi Arabia that would reshape the world. Whoever controls oil controls much more than oil. The agreement was elegant and ruthless. Saudi Arabia would sell its oil exclusively in US dollars. In return, America would provide military protection. Oil dollars, military. Every nation that needed oil, and that meant everyone, now needed dollars first. The petrodollar was born. America didn't need gold anymore. It had something better. It had oil. And oil was the blood of the modern world. But having a monopoly on the world's money wasn't enough. America needed a way to punish anyone who stepped out of line. There's a system most people have never heard of that controls almost every international financial transaction on Earth. It's called SWIFT. SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. It sounds boring. It's anything but. SWIFT processes over $40 trillion in transactions every single day. And here's the part that changes everything. The US has enormous influence over it. This means America can, with the flip of a switch, cut any country off from the global financial system. No trade, no imports, no exports, no banking. Cut off overnight. If you're starting to see how deep this goes, hit like and subscribe to keep exposing what they hide. Because what comes next connects all the dots. Iran found out what happens when America pulls the switch. In 2012, Iranian banks were cut off from SWIFT. Overnight, the Iranian economy went into freefall. Inflation soared, the currency collapsed. Ordinary people couldn't buy basic goods. The message to every nation on Earth was clear. As the great economist John Maynard Keynes warned, there is no subtler, no surer means of overturning the existing basis of society than to debauch the currency. But cutting nations off from finance was just the beginning of America's economic arsenal. The United States currently has active sanctions against more than 30 countries. More nations are under American economic punishment than at any point in history. Cuba has been sanctioned since 1960. That's over 60 years. Venezuela, North Korea, Syria, Myanmar, The list keeps growing. 1. Freeze foreign assets in U.S. banks. 2. Block access to SWIFT payments. 3. Prohibit trade with U.S. companies. 4. Punish any nation trading with the target. That last one is the most devastating. It's called secondary sanctions. America doesn't just punish its enemies. It punishes anyone who does business with its enemies. Obey or pay. A European company wants to buy Iranian oil. Sanctioned. A Chinese bank processes a payment for a Russian firm. Sanctioned. Sanctioned. This is how the dollar becomes a weapon. Not through military force, but through financial strangulation. As former French finance minister Bruno Le Maire admitted publicly, we must reduce our dependency on the US dollar. Even America's allies are starting to feel trapped, and trapped animals eventually fight back. The question is, who fired the first shot? February 2022. Russia invades Ukraine. The Western response was unprecedented. $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves were frozen overnight. $300 billion. Gone. Not seized in a court of law, not confiscated after a trial, just frozen with a phone call. The entire world watched a sovereign nation's savings disappear in one day. Russia was kicked out of SWIFT. Oligarchs had their assets seized. Credit cards stopped working. Frozen, seized, blocked. But here's what the architects of these sanctions didn't expect. Russia didn't collapse. It adapted. Russia demanded payment for natural gas in rubles. It redirected oil exports to India and China. It built alternative payment systems with alarming speed. And perhaps most importantly, it proved something that terrified every government on earth. If they can freeze Russia's money, they can freeze anyone's money. As political scientist John Mearsheimer observed, great powers are always sensitive to the balance of power. Central banks around the world started asking the same question. Are our reserves safe? And the answer was sending shockwaves through every capital on the planet. While the West was busy sanctioning Russia, China was watching and learning. Beijing has been preparing for this moment for over a decade. The Belt and Road Initiative. Trillions of dollars in infrastructure across 70 countries. Roads, ports, railways, and digital networks. But here's what most analysts miss. Belt and Road isn't just about infrastructure. It's about building a parallel financial system. Trade routes power. China has been signing currency swap agreements with dozens of nations, trading in yuan instead of dollars. They settled their first LNG gas trade with the UAE in yuan in 2023. Saudi Arabia is now accepting yuan for oil. Yuan. Remember the Petrodollar Deal we talked about? The one that kept the dollar alive after Nixon killed the gold standard. Saudi Arabia is now open to trading in currencies other than the US dollar. And while building trade routes, China has been buying gold at a pace not seen in decades. As former Singapore Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew once said, China will want to be number one in the world, not just number two. But China isn't acting alone. There's an alliance forming that could change the financial world forever. BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. In 2024, this alliance expanded to include Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Nearly half the world's population is now represented by BRICS nations, and they have one thing in common. They're tired of the dollar. The dollarization. These nations are building alternative payment systems, cross-border settlement in local currencies, digital payment platforms that bypass SWIFT entirely. 1. SBFS replaces SWIFT for Russia. 2. SIPS handles yuan transactions globally. 3. BRICS exploring a shared digital currency. 4. Gold reserves increasing across all members. The goal isn't just to reduce dollar dependence. It's to create a world where America can no longer use its currency as a weapon. As Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar stated, the world is genuinely moving toward multipolarity, and old power centers must adjust. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's happening in real time, in public, with press conferences. The dollar still dominates today, but the cracks are widening, and the technology that could accelerate this shift is already here. There's a new battlefield in the currency war, and it's entirely digital. Over 130 countries are now developing central bank digital currencies. China launched the digital yuan pilot in 2020. It's already processing billions in transactions. And here's the critical detail most people miss. Digital currencies don't need SWIFT. No SWIFT needed. If two countries can settle trade through their own digital currency platforms, America's financial kill switch becomes useless. The Bank for International Settlements, the central bank of central banks, launched Project M-Bridge, a platform connecting the digital currencies of China, Thailand, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, a digital financial highway that completely bypasses the US dollar. And then there's cryptocurrency. Bitcoin, created in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, was designed specifically to operate outside government control. As the anonymous creator Satoshi Nakamoto wrote, the root problem with conventional currency is all the trust that is required to make it work. Nations under sanctions have turned to crypto as a lifeline. The digital revolution in money isn't coming. It's already here. But there's a vulnerability in America's position that makes all of this even more dangerous. The United States national debt has surpassed $34 trillion. America borrows more money every single day than most countries earn in a year. And here's the problem. The only reason America can sustain this level of debt is because the world buys its treasury bonds with dollars that the world is forced to hold. Debt trust erosion. But what happens when nations stop buying? What happens when they have alternatives? The dollar's share of global reserves has dropped from 71% in 1999 to under 59% today. Every time America weaponizes the dollar, it gives the world another reason to leave. As economist Nouriel Roubini warned, the weaponization of the dollar will accelerate the diversification away from it. Even former Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen admitted that sanctions risk undermining the dollar's hegemony. When you use a weapon too many times, people eventually build a shield. The irony is devastating. The more America uses the dollar as a weapon, the faster the world builds alternatives. The very tool of American power is becoming the catalyst for its decline. And this brings us to the question nobody in Washington wants to answer. So where does this end? The world is not abandoning the dollar overnight, but it is building the exits. The transition won't be a dramatic collapse. It will be a slow erosion. Death by 1,000 alternatives. Slow erosion, inevitable. Already, bilateral trade in local currencies is exploding. Gold reserves are at all-time highs. Digital payment systems are multiplying. The petrodollar agreement that sustained American power for 50 years is crumbling as Saudi Arabia diversifies its partnerships. No empire lasts forever, and no currency remains dominant by force alone. The pattern is clear because we've seen it before. The British pound sterling was the world's reserve currency before the dollar. It didn't lose that status in a single day. It eroded over decades as British power declined and a new system emerged. Pattern. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And right now, the rhyme is getting louder. The nations of the world are not fighting the dollar. They are simply walking away from it. The question isn't whether the dollar's dominance will end. It's whether America can adapt before it does. If you made it this far, comment dollar dethroned if you see the pattern now. Every government lies. The question is, what are they lying about?